Hey there.
Hi.
How are you? Nice to
Uh,
meet you.
Nice meeting you too.
Thank
Just,
you so much for joining. Yeah, I was just kind of giving a backdrop and my standing on my soapbox about my take on climate change.
oh, wow.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I just kind of briefly introduced you. Why don't you tell people, why don't you tell the viewers about yourself and what you're doing to help change this crazy world of ours?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm trying to keep my iPhone up so that you can actually see me.
Yeah,
Uh,
we can see you.
so yeah, sorry I missed your intro, but essentially I'm CEO and co-founder of a company called Delivering Happiness, and we started this back in 2010 after launching a book by the same name, Delivering Happiness, with late CEO of Zappos, Tony Hsieh. And so I've been running that company for since that time, and essentially just helping organizations from for-profit to nonprofits to governments and hospitals, and helping their employees understand what sustainable happiness is, so that the equation is, if you have happier employees, you'll have happier customers, and you'll have a more profitable, sustainable business. But at the same time, which is most important for me, is that you're creating more meaningful lives. And by meaningful, it goes back down to why we're here. Being able to ask that question, why am I spending these minutes of the day doing what I'm doing? And especially since COVID, the question is even more important and spotlighted in a way of like really digging deep down inside as to what is most meaningful and how do we really craft our days around that. So that's why I launched another book called Beyond Happiness in October of last year, to really get to more of not just happiness, but more about wholeness, and the belief that it's not just about our highs in our life that we need to celebrate and recognize, but it's also our lows. And being able to understand that, especially after these last couple of years, everyone went through something, and everyone went through some sort of loss. And when I say loss, it's not just of a human being or health. It could be a loss of hope, or a loss of control, loss of expectation. I can go further down the line, but the reality is that everyone has experienced that. And if we, especially in our workplace and therefore life, can understand that within ourselves and also know that, and in the way we interact with our coworkers, then in the end we'll have a definitely, not, if not happy every day, at least a more fulfilling life every day at work, and everything we do.
Yeah, I love that. All of that. We have just going back, let's go 10,000 foot view back to just work in general and the system that we're in and where it sprung from. I'm sure you're familiar with this. My understanding, obviously it's different in other countries, but in the United States in particular, it was, the Industrial Revolution. And, it was essentially you go to school and you're kind of being trained to be a factory worker, and the knowledge that you're learning and kind of the orderly fashion to be like, okay, this is your role. This is what you're going to do. You need to make sure you understand how to follow directions, how to do what you're told, understand basic things. And obviously, the world has changed quite a bit since then. But really the system in terms of bringing up the generation of workers hasn't changed a ton. And, schooling still from that early age, and from what I can see from the majority of, especially public schooling, they're not focusing. They're just kind of going through the motions of, okay, making sure you check off the boxes of learning X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
But in terms of like sustainable, happy living and like connecting what you're actually passionate about with your strengths and what really were meant to do, and figuring out how to find that path. And then when you are in that job, or whether it's a company you start or working for somebody else, understanding how to get the most out of it and whatnot, like that's just glaringly absent from the system. Would you agree with that?
100%. And I love that you bring it to 10,000 foot view, because I'll bring it to 20 for a second. Because even before the industrial age, we as humans, as we evolved, before that, we were agrarians. We were farmers. We were part more with the earth and more doing what was more natural to us at that time. But when the industrial age came about, which was, it was needed in different ways as technology was bringing us to a new era, what hasn't changed since then, because that was a long time ago, but what hasn't changed is the systems that support human beings in today's society versus where we were more trained to do the cog, in the system, and it had to do it for that reason. But what hasn't evolved is that when you look at our workplaces now, most of them look pretty archaic, and knowing that they haven't evolved with our systems of who we are as society. And so what I feel like we're kind of at odds with this tension is that we're not necessarily built to be that way, because we've evolved from a place where we were more centered and there wasn't so much chaos around, relatively speaking. So because of this friction of that, go, 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 social media, priorities from all over your life, I think it's actually really prime time that we're spending to think about how we want to actually prioritize our time. And we're seeing this all the time, right? With Great Resignation, Great Reset, Great whatever you want to call it. I think that's a product that's directly related to how our bodies and minds are actually at odds with this current state. And we kind of need to take it upon ourselves to reset and, I guess, readjust ourselves to what is most important to us first, and then be able to really live. And in your sphere of like behaviors, habits, gamification, all those things is totally a part of it. But until we hit the most important part of ourselves and understanding our sense of purpose and our sense of values, it's hard to gamify or create new habits when we don't know who our grounded self is first.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Right. And part of my system is first you got to shine a big old spotlight on your life. And right, I actually use the term hit the reset button. And you mentioned the Great Resignation, the Great Reset. Right. So, right. With that said, I do feel like this whole thing was a blessing in a way. Right. Obviously, there was a lot of negative parts of COVID, and some people might even get angry with me saying this, but, I do think it forced a lot of people to step back 20,000, 10,000, whatever you want to call it, and take a look at their lives and be like, am I happy? Like, wait a minute. I've had my head down in the sand for so long, tunnel vision, doing this job where I'm just miserable and I'm working my butt off and I'm not really getting ahead or like, what am I doing? I'm working just to work so I can live, but I'm not living. I'm not really living. I'm not enjoying the fruits of my labor and what the world and life really has to offer. So yeah, it sounds like that's exactly what you've caught on to that as well. And you're helping people to sort of say, okay, let's use this as an opportunity to reset and let's pivot. And so with that said, what are some of these things that you help people with and talk about to help them to shift their mind and their life?
So, just to kind of build on what you said too, before I go there, number one is just realizing that if you're thinking these things, you're obviously not alone. And a lot of people are thinking these things in very deep ways. Like, I've been having conversations from CEOs to like frontliners, like all across the board and all around the world. Like, we've been so lucky to have had a global presence and being understanding and being able to see the differences between cultures and geography. But the reality is that at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And so that's why I'm a big proponent of not just happiness anymore, is also humanity within ourselves and within our workplaces. So this is prime time to be asking those deep questions. And these conversations I've been having, it gets to the core of who we are. And some of the things that we start to talk about, and again, I talk about purpose and values, and one of the things we do is called the happiness heartbeats exercise. And it's a pretty simple one, really straightforward. Basically, just imagine you're, the star of your own show, you're the protagonist of your own movie, whatever you want to look at, however you want to look at it, but essentially go through your whole life. And it doesn't have to be just at work. In fact, I also and always recommend doing it work and life. And just go through and kind of capture those high moments in your life, but also capture the lows. So for me, one of my highs was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. Right after that, one of my lows was losing my dad to colon cancer 20 years ago. Another high was starting this company. Another low was losing my co-founder, Tony, in 2020. And these, that was probably the biggest low I've ever had. And going back to the point I made earlier, everyone had those kind of feelings of loss, especially in the last couple of years. So doing this exercise, when you're pulling these moments of your life, highs and lows, and you take a look at them and ask yourself questions like, what values was I living or not living? What people were there or not there? Why were these moments so meaningful? Like, why was this the biggest loss, or why was this the biggest high of my life? You'll start to notice patterns. And those patterns is what helps define our, what we call, or what we say, values. And therefore the behaviors and actions that come out of those values. So going through those highs and lows, I knew for myself that authenticity, freedom, and relationships were stacked up really high as my values. And then as I have those like guiding values in my life, I know better how to design my days. I know how better to react to a situation that's outside of my control and say, what just happened? Was that within my control or outside of my control? Be able to take these times to ask these questions. Is this within my values or outside of my values, to react to it? And then I have a more clear sense of what to do about it in the behaviors and the actions that we talk about. So that's one of the exercises we do. And it surprisingly, especially because, people kind of know what their values are. They think they know, but when they actually dig a bit deeper and asking these questions, you'd be really surprised where your values are and how you prioritize them, especially now, right? Given everything that's happened in the last couple of years.
I love that. That at the end of the day, it's about understanding what is important to you. And I do an exercise kind of to get to the same goal point as you, to help people understand what's important and start living their life around those things. I call it the Back to the Future exercise. I used to call it the funeral exercise, but that was really just too morbid. And I'm an 80s kid. And so I've shifted how I'm looking at it, and it makes sense. So basically what I do is I say, and I've done this for myself, and it's part of how I have a morning routine, and my habits and my life and the actions I take every day are based on this. So I flash forward to the end of my life and I go, okay, what do I want said about me when it's all said and done? Like, I'm being eulogized, right? And I already know for me, and everybody's different, but I feel like as human beings, we do all share these same cores, which are your mindset, your career and your finances, your relationships, your physical health, and your emotional health. And I feel like there's different degrees of how people express those and live those, and everybody's different in terms of the habits they develop. But at the end of the day, those are super important things that science has proven without a doubt equate to happiness. And so you want to continue to build momentum and to grow in those areas. And so I say, okay, in each of these areas, what do I want said about me? And then I have a list literally of like what I'd want people to say about me in each of those. And then I go back to the future, back to the present. And I actually say, okay, let's reverse engineer this. Like, what do I need to start building my habit? Like, what are the habits I need to build in each of my cores? And then I literally just have a list of like mindset, relationships, physical health, and I have the habits that I'm constantly working on. And my goal is to just get to the point where these become automatic, because habits, which I'm sure you're aware, they don't care if they're good or bad, helping or hurting you. They're going to compound and they're going to do their thing over time. Just like we talked about earlier in the show, where it's like, if you're in this like zone of like, this is what I'm supposed to do and I'm going to do this, and all of a sudden you look back 20 years later and you're like, shit, I'm doing stuff that makes me unhappy every day. Like, what am I doing? Right.
We're actually cut from the same cloth because I'm an 80s kid too. So when you said morbid, I'm like, yeah, I love it. I listen to The Cure, Depeche Mode, like early.
Oh yeah. Love me some Cure and Depeche.
And the second thing, we're cut from the same cloth. I actually have an exercise in the book, which is how to live your living legacy, not the legacy that you're gone already, but just get into that reframe of, we don't really want to have a legacy that's like acknowledged and respected after we're gone. So how do we make our everydays a living legacy, because we're actively living what that legacy will be?
I love it. Yeah, that's it. Right. And because, at the end of the day too, as you get older, I don't know how old you are, and I'm not going to ask you, but I've noticed for myself, when you're young, it's just all about me, like, what can I get out of the world? Like, and then as you start to get older, especially if you have children, I feel like that was a shifter for me in my mindset of like, well, wait a minute now, like, it's not all about me, and I am not going to be here forever. And what do I want set? Like, what legacy am I leaving? Like, what are people, is the world going to go, thank God you're gone because you just sucked the life out of me every second you were on this planet, and you lied and you cheated and you stealed and you were just a horrible person? Or is the world going to go, thank God you were around, you helped, you moved the needle a little bit, like you actually helped make a difference and made people and myself, who I'm now talking from the world's perspective, happy, right? And that's something that just is so, as you get older, you do realize like the amount of happiness and joy, and obviously you've experienced this because you're living it right now, of helping others and feeling like you're actually giving back. Like there's no better feeling, yet it's so hard for people to get that. I feel like, and I remember reading that, even like when I've read so many self-help books, and I remember reading like these people that had already made it and were successful, and they're like, it's not about the money, it's about, and I'd be like, oh, like, what are you talking about? Of course it's about the money. And then when I did have my own success and I built a business and I sold it, I realized, I was like, now I get it. Like, I wish I understood this, 15 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's a key point that you bring up, is because like I wish I knew that, when I was young it was about me, and now it's like different, especially if you have kids. And I think it's an important reminder from that is that you didn't realize it for yourself, and you didn't make those fundamental shifts in your daily habits until you experienced it. And that's the biggest key. And a lot of people are just like, oh, that's easy for you to say, you've done this, you've done that, and all that. And it's totally true. Like I'm guilty of that. When I wasn't aware of the difference it makes when you actually experience what it means to, be grounded in yourself, be true and authentic to who you are. And part of that is also helping others. And when you start that rhythm, you'll feel this virtuous cycle, because you realize you're doing something for someone else, but you'll get that much back from that act and service. And until you experience and feel it, then you're not going to really change your life for it.
It's hard. It's so hard to convince people, isn't it? Because you're exactly right. Unless you do it, and that's the problem, is trying to get people to actually do it. Because we live in a very selfish culture, society, world. I mean, I think it's not just the United States. I mean, it really, you look around, some are better than others, but and it's like, it's still a me, more society. And if anything, it's getting worse. Right? It's not going in the right direction. If you look at, just trends and the way that, people, like the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. There's no mentality of, hey, look, there's plenty for everybody. Let's try to figure this out, and let's have everybody have at least a minimum lifestyle where they can be happy and live a good life. No, it's about how much can I make? And then, at a certain point, I guarantee you, every one of those people that are living their life that way, like more, and and unfortunately, that's just like a never ending, because then they get more and they think it'll make them happy, and it doesn't, or it does for like 5 seconds, and then they got to hit the next level and the next level, and they're always just chasing that, but they're actually chasing something that's making them miserable.
Yeah. And I'm going to have to also respectfully challenge one of the things you said, because you're saying that it's getting worse, the whole me culture. And in so many ways, yes, hands down. But I've also seen, especially with what, this great reset happened, people realigning themselves so that they realize it's not just the me, and it's the we in the community. And so it's been more of a self-selection, and also really self-direction, to be able to make those moves, do those actions of going out and actually creating your own community, or joining and being a part of one that already exists. And that, I think, is the only respectful kind of like question I would ask, because I saw some amazing communities develop out of COVID. We worked with this hospital system in upstate New York, and here's a hospital system in the middle of COVID, and they were already a pretty good place to work. But because they focus so much on each other, the community, their culture, their values, during COVID, they actually went from like 90 something to best place to work to number 19. And that blew my mind away, because like here are people that really have no sense of control of what they're going to do the next day or what they're going to see. The CEO was told, like, hey, don't go on the floors. Like, this is when COVID hit, first wave. Don't go on the floors. We need you in the office. We need you healthy. And he said, no, you know what? I got to be with my people. I got to be with my team. We're going to do this together, and change the whole mentality of what community can be in almost a war zone situation, So I have to say, I continue to be inspired by those stories, that when people have that will, they'll make the community happen.
So totally agree with the fact that there's definitely these pockets of people that are starting to awaken, and then that is great. And I even see on social media, I feel like wellness is becoming more of a cool trend where, I mean, you and I don't know if you agree with this, but I feel like for most of my life, it's been more of a, what's wrong with you? You need to go get self-help. Like,
Yeah.
what are you broken? Are you crazy? Do you need help? And I mean, I always felt that way. Like because I was suicidal in college, and I serendipitously was introduced to my first self-help book, and it completely I look back and I'm like, what would have happened had I not? And it was very serendipitous, and I just got hooked immediately, and I was like, wow, like there's a different way to think, and I'm not the only one that has these thoughts. Like, this guy wrote a book and it's a national bestseller, so clearly other people are thinking these types of things, right? But I felt like I never was like out in the open about like, hey, I'm a huge self-help reader and you guys should, like I just kind of did it privately to myself, and I just slowly started building my own self up. And I do see that starting to shift. And, you got companies, and that's the whole gamification. And that's kind of what I'm about. And what I'm trying to put out there is like, it is cool and it can be fun to change your life and to make differences. And we can use the same science and technology that's used to get us to be addicted to things like social media and playing games and these things to actually help to make a difference in our life. And you look at companies like Peloton, getting people addicted to basically working out because they got the competition and they got the points and they got the technology and the screen, and it's fun, right? It became like a cult. And there's more and more of those, the app Calm for helping people meditate. And, there's more and more of those types of things. And again, you just look on social media and there's a growing like wellness trend. And so for that, I'm loving it and agree with you. Like you're starting to see these things. But I do still feel like in general, the masses, the majority of people, and there's a reason that teen suicide continues to be at an all-time high every single year, year after year, are still focused on the wrong things, which are how they look, how much money they can make, how they're, the power, the prestige, the I want to be Insta famous, especially for these young adults, and I work with a lot of them that I mentor, I mean, the pressure's insane for to look a certain way, to be a certain way. And you've got this illusion on social media that people aren't going to post their ugly stuff. I mean, the ones that do, I feel like, are the ones that actually end up getting the best strong followings that I've seen, because it's like, okay, this person's real, and people just want real. And there's just 90% of social media, it's not real, it's fake. And that's what people are more and more on their phones, and they're focusing on that stuff, and they're looking at that stuff. And that's the stuff that scares me.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that sense of like what the overarching trends are. But the last point that you hit is, I think it will only augment from here, the point of being authentic. Because and I think that's why we're seeing such big traction for those people that are just being real, no makeup, just woke up
right.
And that's when you see like these pockets are growing.
Yeah.
Positive way, because who doesn't want to just be themselves? And not just in life, but at work. And that's
how great would that be, right? To just be yourself all the time and not try to put on a mask every day.
Yeah. And I think with this great resignation, and I don't know if you saw the latest stats that came out yesterday, like 4.5 million people in the US quit this month, which is the highest ever. And since they started recording this data, and we also have the highest number of open jobs ever since they started recording this data 20 years ago. So what does that mean? That means like we have opportunities. That means if we actually do the deep dive within ourselves to understand all these things that we're talking about, what's most meaningful, those opportunities are there to be in a place that we can actually be ourselves. Let's just be me. Let's just be you. And so that's why I'm really feeling more positive about everything, even though it's been a crazy ass last couple of years.
Well, so let's dive in a little bit more to what does that mean? Okay, so like I want to get your take on, where do we go from here? So it's like, okay, right, all these people are quitting their job. People are realizing, like we've been talking about, like, okay, I'm not happy. I don't like what I'm doing. But where are they going to go? And what are they going to do? And how are they going to mesh being happy with a job that they can get paid to live the life they're, sustain their life?
Well, first of all, I would say, there's no silver bullet, no magic pill for any of this. because there's still going to be so many things outside of our control. But I think when you do these kind of exercises in understanding yourself, then at least you have a set of criteria that you'll say, yes, this is so aligned with who I am, or this is kind of a maybe, or at least you'll have criteria that says, hell no, I'm not going to do that. That is totally against
Right.
system or my pay or my flexibility, my need for that. And ultimately, of course, the sense of purpose. And maybe that's too high of a goal right now, but I think if we can reframe it, it can be all part in the same of the criteria that we want for ourselves. So I think that especially with the need to adapt more than ever, by having that core groundedness within ourselves, then all these options doesn't get so heady. It doesn't get daunting. Like defining your own purpose and values, it shouldn't be daunting. And when you're looking at all these different opportunities, have confidence that when you've done that work for yourself, then those options could be that much clearer, and realize that they might be the wrong option. And people are jumping ship left and right. Some people have already had 2-3 jobs in the last year, and it's not stable, but at least there's an indicator that people are trying new things. And part of understanding what you want is knowing what you don't want. So I feel like this is, even though times are crazy, this is time of opportunity as long as you're grounded yourself as to what really means the most to you, and not just, free Red Bull or pay raise or, whatever those perks can be.
Yeah.
But real intrinsic stuff that matters the most to you.
So let's here's something people don't talk about a lot, but let's take a look at the other side of that, which is something I've been thinking about a lot lately in terms of like, what does that do? How does that change society as a whole? And what I mean by that is like, okay, so it seems like there's this great resignation, especially with like service jobs, right? Like service industry jobs, hotels, restaurants, like people are like, I don't want to do this anymore, but we still need those people. Right. So where do those people come from? If people go, this doesn't align with my core values and happiness, and I don't want to work a 12-hour shift and smell like garbage at the end. And, and it's like, okay, but does anybody? Right. So then what happens to all these jobs that still need to be fulfilled?
Yeah, that's definitely a bigger question. And so what I've seen, that the reality is that there are actually people in these industries that love their job. And it's not because of what we think the job entails, smelling like garbage, cleaning bathrooms, whatever. It's because of what they've created for themselves within that job. So I'll give you an example, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but there's a gentleman, one of our clients out in Mexico, Sinopolis, which is a big Cineplex. And while we were working with them, they did this whole thing of like, let's see who are our most purpose-aligned people in our teams, in our company. And this is a worldwide company. And what they found this guy, this gentleman, he worked in the bathroom. He was basically cleaning the bathrooms every day. And he was basically nominated to be the top 5 people in the whole company to be purpose-driven, because what he did, he realized for himself, the purpose he got out of cleaning those bathrooms was what he had the journal. He said, I have a paycheck is one thing, and this is my purpose. And he has a journal of all the things of what people say to him when they experience what he does at the bathroom, with his way of service, with his way of interacting with each other. So I know that's a very extreme example, but the point of it is that he created what he wanted himself.
Right. I think that's a good point, is getting people to that point where finding something that obviously does align with what their passions, their strengths, as much as possible. But even beyond that, it's when you're in that job, finding a way to make meaning, right? And to make it purposeful, and to get that gratitude and joy out of it. And what you just said is a perfect example of that, where it's like, right, how many people are doing that? Not many, but yet this guy's kind of hacked the system. He's hacked his own brain into being like, by doing this, I love what I do now, right? And we definitely need more of that.
Well, if you think of it another way, in a more practical sense, if it's, don't even touch about purpose. If you think about it another way, he's having all of his needs met in not just a paycheck, but in a holistic sense. And when I talked about wholeness before, and you kind of mentioned different parts of this, so this is a different exercise that might be helpful for people. Like, We call it the wheel of wholeness. And if you imagine a pie, each piece of the pie represents a piece of you that's most important to you. So the way we would break it down, and you mentioned these earlier too, mental, emotional, physical, relational, financial, spiritual, you know, so on down the line. These are pies that you're identifying for yourself. But to make it more of a current state versus future state, I would ask, just map that out for yourself. Where are you in each of these elements? Where are you in each of these pies, you know, pie slices? And then in a month, and do it again in 2 months. And you can see which ones are going up, which ones are going down. And then you have a better sense of, this is where I need to focus. And this celebrate, oh my gosh, I did this, this, and this, and I'm actually feeling happier at work. Or, you know, oh wow, I'm doing this and this, like my health is going down. So what am I doing wrong? So at least it gives like more like a, you know, play by play as you do your everyday behaviors and habits and see how it affects you.
I'm going to take what you just said and I'm going to clip it out. And when I launch my app, you are going to be the face of my app, because you just said, I mean, I'm kidding, but you just literally said what my app's purpose is, which is, you know, you've got these cores and it's a game, and the idea is you have these 5 main areas of your life under the cores of your rocket ship. And the idea is in order to break Earth's gravitational pull, you have to slowly but surely start replacing your habits in each core. And you start with one core, one at a time. You start with your mindset, which is the most important of the cores, because once you get that going for you, everything else becomes incrementally easier. And then in order to get to the next planet, you know, and then you start unlocking different cores. And then at a certain point, you get to the point where all of your cores are unlocked, and you've already shown a spotlight on the habits that you're currently doing, and then the ones that you want to do. And you're literally seeing, and you have this like moment, I call it the momentum juice. Like you're looking at your rocket from a 10,000 foot view, and you're seeing how much momentum is filled in each of these cores. And the idea is, like you said, you can start to see like, oh wait, I'm slacking over here. I'm not doing my habits in my physical health. But I'm okay over here on my career and my finances. So I need to spend a little bit more attention over here. And the idea is you want to keep them fairly balanced. It's never going to be perfectly balanced. It's impossible to every single day of your life, like do all the habits in each one of your cores. But in general, to keep it balanced and to make sure that you're just continuing ahead in the right direction, to me, that's happiness.
Yeah, well, that's actually scientifically proven too. The sense of progress, number one, a sense of autonomy, sense of progress is huge on sustainable happiness. So by using your app, it sounds like everyone in my community should be using your app. So let me know when it comes out. But you can use my face if you want.
I will. So we're running out of time here, but I always like to end with just habits. Obviously is a big theme of what we're kind of talking about today. And I think we both agree the importance of, you know, it sounds like from the 10,000 foot view of our conversation so far, we basically said you need to first get that, like become aware of who you are and what makes you happy, regardless of how you get there, your method, my method, but figure that out and then start building your life around those things. Right. And so I guess I like to ask people, and I'll ask you, is there a particular habit that you have developed through the course of your life? Maybe it started out as a bad habit and you've transformed it now into a good habit, or as I call it, failure versus success habit, that is continuing to build momentum for you every day that you'd like to share to help other people potentially build it?
Real quick to what you just said, though, make sure when you say figure out what makes you happy, make sure it's intrinsic happiness, not rainbows and unicorn happiness. That's the big habit for me. I think what has been most helpful, especially in the last couple of years, is having a beginner's mindset. And that applies to all the habits I think that I have or don't have. I think that when I put that beginner's mindset hat on in the morning, it just changes my view. If I take a moment, and you can call it meditation, you can call it whatever you want, but I just take a moment to make sure I have that hat on with that beginner's mindset, then I get to see things in a way that I not necessarily saw like in the past. I'm breaking down my assumptions of others and myself. I'm breaking down whatever quote unquote beliefs that I thought were just true, but might not be anymore. And then I get to learn. So that's when I feel like I'm growing. And just as an example, because I've been in meditation, but I've been dabbling, you know, here and there. I did a week-long meditation retreat last week in San Diego. 7 days, 40 hours of meditation, the longest one being 5 hours starting at 4 a.m. A week before that, if anyone knew me from that, would they imagine me doing it? Hell no. I would never imagine myself doing it. But
Right.
I had mindset going in and I said, open head, open mind, open heart, and I got through it. And now I have such a different take on what meditation is. It's not, just this woo-woo stuff. Now I know what it means to me. And I think that's how I'm able to grow and develop habits that I have or don't have.
I love it. That is a fantastic answer, and that's a great way to close this out. Before we leave, where can people learn more about what you're doing and how you can help them?
Yeah, totally. So I have my website, lim.com, and then also the company deliveringhappiness.com. You can find me there on social, wherever, but love to hear from you. If you have any questions, we're here to help.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for being on. This was an absolute pleasure. I got to learn a lot. It's always amazing to me how, the people that seem to get it, it's not like it's a radically different where I'm like, oh, wow. It's more like, yeah, they get it just like I do, but there's different ways to help people to understand that. And I applaud you and your efforts and your method and how you're doing it. I think obviously you've had great success, so keep doing it, please. We need more of that.
Thank you. Likewise to you too. Keep on with all the good stuff you're doing, and let me know when you launch that app.
I definitely will. We'll keep in touch for sure. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jenn.
Thank you, everyone.
Talk soon. Okay.
That's it for the 5 Core Life. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like button on this video and pound that subscribe button so you get notified when new episodes drop. Also, please fill out the free 5 Core Life Evaluator quiz. It's a great way to get a baseline of where you are in the 5 cores and which of the 5 cores you need support. In addition, you'll get some actionable advice that you can apply and start improving your life in the areas that you need it most. That's it for today's episode of the 5 Core Life Podcast. Have a wonderful day.
Get moving. Gain momentum. Join the movement. Join Emmett by going to moremomentum.com to take a free life evaluator quiz on where you currently stand in each of your 5 cores.